Hi, and welcome to this demo of the Stratus Live Ignite Volunteer Events module. In this video, we'll take a look at how an administrator can edit a volunteer event. First, as mentioned in a previous video, a user must have one of the administrator roles to access and manage volunteer events. So once I'm logged in, I click the drop-down, select Dashboard to get to the administrator, and then select Company Events from the Volunteer section on the left navigation. This will present the page with all of the volunteer events created for this site, and these are sorted by default in the start date of the event. Now my event starts in late April, so I scroll down to the bottom and I can see my event here, Food Drive, Virginia Beach. Clicking this link here will present me with sort of the default landing page, and from here I can click the Manage Event link at the top, and that will get me to the Edit pages, where I can change some of the details of my event. Clicking on the Edit link next to my event in the administrator will get me to the same page. So the landing page here shows me some basic information about my event, when it starts, how many registered users I have. As my event is still in draft mode, it's not available to registrants, so there are no registrations so far. If there were, I'd see a bit of information about my attendees, and there'll be some reports available here. We'll show those in a later video. Some of the items available for editing are the areas that we added when we created the event, such as the event info, which shows the name and the description, time and location of my event, and the charity that we selected when we created it. If we needed to make any changes to any of these sections, I would make the change in that section and then click my Save Changes button. What we're going to take a look at now are some other areas where we can collect some additional information from our registrants. First, we'll take a look at volunteer settings. Now this shows us if we need to, we can add a minimum number of attendees and a max number of attendees. I need a minimum of 10, and I have a maximum of 20 for my event, so I enter those numbers. I click Save Changes. You can see I get my success notification at the bottom once it's saved. Another area that we can add to the registration process is collecting t-shirt sizes if we plan on printing t-shirts for our event volunteers. If we do, we can turn on the capture t-shirt size, and then we select the various sizes that we want to offer to our event attendees for their t-shirts. And again, they'll be asked this as part of the registration process. So I've added both of those, and I click Save Changes, and again I get my Save Changes notification down here. Another area that we can get information from our attendees is volunteer shifts. Now if my event is long enough, I can create shifts so that my event attendees can choose which shift best meets their schedule. If I want to add shifts, I click Yes, and here's where I can enter the various shifts. Now my event is in late April on the 25th, so I'm going to allow my attendees to select one of two shifts, one that starts at 8 in the morning, which is when the event begins, and it will run through noon. So I select those from the drop down. I'm going to need a minimum of 5 and a max of 10 for these roles, and these folks will be in a collections role. So once I have that information entered, I click the plus button here. I'll save my changes once again, and then I can add a second shift for the afternoon volunteer shift. So now I have my two shifts added. Again, one that begins at 8 in the morning and runs till noon, and a second shift that runs from noon till 4 o'clock. And I have a minimum of 5 and a max of 10 for both of those shifts. And these volunteers will be in a collections role. Once I have that information entered, I can click Save Changes. And again, you can see my success notification down on the lower right. The last area we want to talk about is where we can ask some questions of our event attendees so that we can get a little bit more information about them. We can add up to 3 questions, and we have 3 different question types. We'll see these under this drop down. The first is a freeform question where we ask a question and give our attendees the ability to just type their answer in a text box. The second is a single choice question where we ask them a question and they can choose from one of the available options. The last is a multi-choice question where we ask a question and they can choose from a list of possible responses. So let's take a look at the freeform question. I click freeform question, click the plus button, and here's where I enter my question text. So my question text is, what will you be bringing as donations? Once I have that in there, I click the plus sign and it's saved. Now suppose I want to add a second question as a single choice question. Again, I select that from the drop down, click the plus sign, and I get the box where I enter my question text and where I can add 2 choices for the user to select from. As we are collecting food for the food bank, I want to know if my attendees can lift a 20-pound box. And I can add a yes option, click enter, and then a no option. And then I save my changes. So I have 2 questions so far to ask my event attendees. And the last question is, I'm going to add a multi-choice question. Again, I select that from the drop-down, click the plus sign, and I want to know if my event attendees can give me an idea if they're available for later food drives. So I'm going to add, just to show you that text, can you be available for one of the following food drives? So I'm going to add some choices for May 23rd, June 20th, and July 25th, 2020. And then I click Save Changes. And now I have my 3 questions that would be asked of event attendees during the registration process. And again, if I want to change any of these areas, I can review them. And if I make changes to any of these areas, I need to be sure I click the Save Changes button so that my changes are saved.